Boeing has agreed to plead guilty to criminal fraud charges in connection with its fatal 737 MAX 8 plane crashes. 346 people died in those incidents. So the deal brands Boeing a felon. It also allows it to avoid going to trial amidst safety issues and a larger image crisis. According to this deal, Boeing will be fined $487 million. So what does the deal entail, and what does that mean for the families of the victims? For more, we're joined this morning by aviation analyst Keith Mackey. He's joining us this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
First of all, what caused Boeing to face these charges in the first place? We know that there were these incidents in 2018 and 2019. How did we get to the position we're in now?
Okay, good question. What happened then is that Airbus came out with a more efficient airplane. And in order to compete with it, because of its lower fuel burn, Boeing had to provide a similar fuel burn for their airplanes. Well, they had two choices. They could either build an entirely new airplane or somehow or other modify the 737 to accommodate the larger engines that were necessary for the reduced fuel burn. And there wasn't enough room under the wing for these engines, so Boeing moved the engines forward so they could lift them up over the leading edge of the wing. But when they did this, it caused the airplane to fly differently. And this would probably have triggered requirements for pilot training, which would have made the airplane not acceptable to the airlines because of the additional expenses. So Boeing, without telling the FAA or the airlines that operated them, installed an electronic system to compensate for this. Mm-hmm. What they did, they only put one sensor in to work it. So there were not redundancy that we should have in an aircraft system. When this system failed, it was a paramount cause of both crashes. Yeah. And this is what the fine is for. It's for only things that happened before the crashes involving the two airplanes.
Right now, they are going to face, by pleading guilty, they're going to face up to $487 US in fines. That's a fraction of the almost $25 billion that the victims' families were asking for. What are the other components of this deal? Because a large portion of their bottom line, 32%, is made up of contracts to places like the U.S. military.
Well, that's right. And because Boeing is now a criminal enterprise, the customers don't have to deal with them any longer. But Boeing's business, 37% of it involves the U.S. government. So neither the U.S. government nor Boeing can really afford to cancel these contracts.
So this also then, I imagine, could complicate Boeing's ability to sell products to the U.S. government in those contracts. How are they going to get around that?
Well, I think that they're going to have to ignore the fact that they're criminal charges because both the government and Boeing need each other in order to get the job done with the contracts that they now have. They can't easily shift it to someone else.
What does this mean for the future of the company?
Well, I think it depends what road they take. Historically, for the last several years, Boeing's been run by bean counters, by accountants rather than engineers. And I think these problems are a result of this. And unless they change their method of doing business, and this agreement is supposed to force them into this, because they now have to spend $455 million on compliance and safety programs over the next 3 years, which is an increase of 75% over what they were paying. In addition, they're going to have to appoint a government regulator to oversee their assembly lines and their work product to see that they're complying with regulations.
I'm wondering if you can go over some of the numbers with me, because there's this $487 million fine, but there's also a number of around $230 million. What in the end will Boeing end up having to shell out by pleading guilty?
Well, I think the initial cost to them was $2.5 billion. But of that, 75% related to costs that they'd already made to airline customers. They paid $500 million to victims' families. They paid a $243.6 million fine, and now they're going to have to pay that fine again. In other words, the fine will double in order to effect this settlement. So, and then we have the $455 million they've agreed to pay to clean up their act as far as production is concerned.
Keith, quickly, last question. You know, the part of the point of having a plea like this and having a accountability of having to pay these fines is to send a message. But what message does it send to airlines like Boeing when you can be called a felon, you admitted to conspiracy, and you still get to operate and provide contracts potentially to the U.S. government or others?
It's kind of scary, isn't it? Actually, this isn't finished. We've only resolved the problems that occurred before the MAX crashes. There's a lot of other things. There's 12 whistleblowers that have come forward. We have the incident of the door plug leaving the airplane this past January, which actually triggered the criminal investigation because they didn't meet their 3-year requirement to operate without incident. So we're not finished yet. We're going to hear more about this. And additionally, the agreement now has to be approved by a federal judge.
Keith Mackey, I want to thank you for your insights today. We'll be talking again soon. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good morning.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.